For those of you who don't know, over the years on either the podcast or on the website, I have always been quite critical of Final Fantasy XII. With Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age coming out in a matter of months, I've decided to adopt a more positive viewpoint. I could sit here and say that I'm going to stick to my guns, that I didn't really like it the first time around, and that playing it again won't change my opinion. But that wouldn't be the truth. In reality, I'm actually really excited to check it out again, and that's what this video is all about, explaining where I'm coming from and why despite that, I'm still very much interested in checking out the Zodiac Age. I should also note that this video was requested by Andy RBSK, one of our Patreon supporters. They asked that I make a video about Final Fantasy XII, so here we go. Oh, and if you'd like us to make a video about a topic of your choosing, head over to our Patreon to see how. Alright, so the truth is that after playing Final Fantasy XII, 8, 9, 10, 10-11, and revisiting older titles and spin-off titles like Tactics Advance and Crystal Chronicles, Final Fantasy XII was the first game in the series aside from Mystic Quest that just didn't click when I played it. I was kind of prepared for this, and perhaps negatively influenced by the general feeling of uncertainty within the community prior to its release, but I had still tried to hype myself up in preparation. For starters, I was obsessed with Final Fantasy XI, and the word on the street at the time was that Final Fantasy XII would be like an offline version of Final Fantasy XI. There was also the constant listening to Kiss Me Goodbye and Symphonic Poem following their releases in Japan. Heck, I'd even bought into the build-up by playing a Japanese import of Itadaki Street Special, which featured cameos of Vaan and Ash before Final Fantasy XII even released. It was therefore a deflating experience, as Final Fantasy XII just didn't resonate with me when I played it. What also didn't help was that it didn't resonate with any of my friends either, both locally or virtually. It was a strange feeling. I'd become so used to talking about Final Fantasy games with my friends over the years, but nobody wanted to further the conversation when it came to Final Fantasy XII. They just wanted to harken back to the good old days or look to the future in the hope that this was just a blip on the radar and there would be a return to form. It was the first time since I'd got into the franchise that I'd experienced anything of this nature, although admittedly Final Fantasy X-2 had somewhat prepared me for it after being dubbed too girly by some. With hindsight, it was just that Final Fantasy XII was a game that catered to a different type of Final Fantasy fan, and opinions have, of course, softened over the years, especially with the release and completion of the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy. What we saw was that fans of Final Fantasy XII began to have a voice that wasn't being drowned out by the dissenters so much anymore, and because of this, their numbers grew. I always remember when we first started getting genuine complaints about our negative coverage of Final Fantasy XII on the podcast, and it kind of stuck with me. It didn't make me shy away from my opinions, and I didn't suddenly become a huge Final Fantasy XII fan, but it did make me think more about how I represented my opinions. And with other titles getting re-releases and remasters, this voice that had been growing started to focus on the fact that Square Enix should really revisit the most famous entry into the Ivalice franchise, something which of course is now a reality. These cries for an HD remaster started as a murmur, but the nays got more and more drowned out by the yays, and these days it's not too far out of place to see fans and critics stating that Final Fantasy XII is actually one of, if not the best Final Fantasy game in the franchise. IGN, for example, published a list last year containing the collective thoughts of editors and ranked Final Fantasy XII as the second best game in the franchise, only after Final Fantasy VI. But by comparison, 7 years ago, they said it was one of the worst, only placing it ahead of Final Fantasy II, III, and XI. Due to the change of sentiment, the announcement of Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age was therefore very well timed. I wouldn't say that hype was quite at fever pitch prior to its announcement, but there had been numerous things stoking the fires, Arnie Rost's infamous blunder being one, and the Prima Games HD screenshot fiasco being another. Each served to show just how ready the fan base was to experience Final Fantasy XII again, and it's continued since, with the panel at PAX East, supposedly packed according to the guy who was running it. Anyway, as someone who, as I mentioned right at the beginning, has been quite critical of Final Fantasy XII, I've actually been eagerly anticipating this announcement for some time. I mean, sure, you won't quite see me swinging from the rafters with glee, but now that it's a reality, and not just a string of rumours and missteps, it's raised some questions. I mean, it has, in all honesty, been quite some time since I was able to play Final Fantasy XII, as I don't have a working PS2 lying around, and I haven't been passionate enough about playing it again to dip into the realm of PlayStation 2 emulation. But with mass opinion changing in such an extreme fashion, this will give me the opportunity to see if I would still feel the same if I play it now. The news that it wouldn't just be a straight remaster of Final Fantasy XII also piqued my interest. Instead, as I hoped, it's the International Zodiac job system which is being remastered. This version changes things around a bit and also adds new content, which should also help to make the Final Fantasy XII HD remaster something of a fresher experience. Although I can't literally compare it as I'm European, I do think it's kind of akin to how North Americans feel about having only just got the experience of the Dark Aeons and Penance in Final Fantasy X, albeit perhaps a little more extreme in the Final Fantasy XII situation. The Final Fantasy XII original soundtrack has also been a bit of a bugbear of mine over the years, namely due to the samples they use throughout. The few orchestral pieces that did feature sound absolutely glorious, but many of the other parts of the soundtrack suffer, and with this new version getting a remastered soundtrack, I have hope that this gripe will be rendered obsolete. It's a tentative hope though, after the mixed bag that is the Final Fantasy X HD remastered soundtrack. So yes, I have been a critic of Final Fantasy XII over the years, but I'm looking at the upcoming release of the Zodiac Age with optimism. It's the one HD remaster that genuinely interests me out of all the ones they've done, and not just because I will get to hear Nolan North as Vossler again in all his glory. No, it interests me because while I may still feel the same after playing the Zodiac Age, it may also win me over this time around, allowing me to see what many of the fervent Final Fantasy XII fanbase have been seeing all along, and that is something I'm looking forward to. How many of you guys are looking forward to picking up the Zodiac Age? And if you are, will you be picking it up like me to see if your opinions have changed over time? Or is it that you'll either be playing it for the first time, or you just love Final Fantasy XII so much that you can't resist and want to play it again? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Oh, and if you'd like to support our channel, please head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/ffunion. These awesome folks have already done so why not join them? Thanks for watching guys, this is Daryl signing out. See you next time.